Walk into a premium American electronics retailer today. The black, cloth-wrapped monoliths are gone. In 1990, the definitive technology BP-10 was not merely a speaker. It was the undisputed heavyweight of the suburban American home theater. It stood tall, pushed air from both sides, and commanded the room. Today, that same retail space is lined with thin plastic sound bars. The massive Bipolar cabinets have vanished. The brand name itself now sits quietly inside the portfolio of an unrelated medical technology corporation. The paradox is that the BP-10 did not disappear because America stopped watching movies. It disappeared because the market that praised physical fidelity suddenly rewarded invisible convenience. A brand built on massive, room-shaking air displacement was eventually forced to engineer itself into a wall ornament. But the real story of the BP-10 is not just how a corporate holding company absorbed a hi-fi giant. It is the story of how the American listening room learned to trust reflected sound, and what happened when the physical temple of the home theater was finally taken apart. Every week, we tell the stories of the American speakers, audio brands, and listening rooms that once shaped how people heard music, movies, and memory. And what happened when the market moved on. Subscribe if that history matters to you. The story begins not with nostalgia, but with a specific place, in a Maryland audio lab in 1990. In 1990, the American audio market was undergoing a quiet, violent shift. For decades, the living room had been arranged around a silver stereo receiver, a turntable, and 2 wooden cabinets. But by the dawn of the new decade, the television was demanding the center of the room. The era of the dedicated music-only hi-fi system was ending. The era of the American home theater was beginning. Sandy Gross understood this shift earlier than most. In the 1970s, he had co-founded Polk Audio in Baltimore, Maryland, helping to democratize high-fidelity sound for the American middle class. He had spent years building a vast dealer network and watching exactly how Americans arranged their rooms. By 1989, Gross recognized a massive gap in the market. He left Polk Audio, a brand he had helped turn into an industry titan, and partnered with Don Gavogue and Ed Blay to start an entirely new venture in Owings Mills, Maryland. They called it Definitive Technology. The American absence was glaring. Families were renting VHS tapes and buying early laserdiscs encoded with Dolby Surround soundtracks. They wanted the scale, the weight, and the physical envelopment of a commercial movie theater inside their own homes. But the speakers available on the shelves of local stereo stores were fundamentally the wrong tools for the job. Traditional hi-fi speakers were designed for direct radiation. They pointed forward. They were built for a single listener sitting in a dedicated chair locked into the sweet spot, the exact center point between 2 cabinets where the stereo image. The illusion that sounds come from places between and around 2 speakers was sharpest. If the listener shifted on the couch, or if a family sat together across a wide sofa, the illusion collapsed. A traditional speaker acted like an acoustic flashlight, aiming sound directly at one specific target. But a movie theater does not sound like a flashlight. A movie theater sounds like an environment. Gross and his engineering team needed a speaker that could make a small, carpeted suburban basement feel like a vast Hollywood soundstage. Their answer, launched in 1990, was the Definitive Technology BP-10. The BP-10 was not a traditional forward-firing wooden box. It was a bipolar speaker, an acoustic design that uses 2 sets of identical drivers, one facing forward and one facing backward, wired to push air in phase at the exact same time. When the front cone moved out toward the listener, the rear cone moved out toward the wall. The physical execution was uncompromising. The BP-10 featured a front-firing woofer, a large driver designed to reproduce low frequencies such as bass and drums, and a tweeter, a small driver designed to reproduce high frequencies such as cymbals, strings, and vocal detail. It then placed an identical woofer and tweeter on the rear baffle. All of this was housed in a densely braced cabinet to handle the immense internal air pressure of 4 drivers moving simultaneously. But this design immediately triggered a war with the traditional American hi-fi establishment. To the audiophile purist of 1990, a bipolar speaker was acoustic heresy. The purists believed in controlling the room. They demanded direct sound that travels straight from the speaker to the listener without interference. The BP-10 deliberately generated reflected sound that bounces off walls, floors, or ceilings before reaching the listener. By firing exactly half of its acoustic energy directly at the wall behind it, the BP-10 created a calculated, massive delay. The listener heard the front drivers first, and milliseconds later, the sound bouncing off the drywall arrived at their ears. High-end audio critics argued this smeared the recording. They claimed it ruined the pinpoint accuracy of a jazz trio or a classical quartet. They called the bipolar effect an artificial trick, a gimmick that generated fake imaging to mask a lack of true fidelity. They wanted a speaker that reproduced exactly what the microphone heard in the studio, nothing more, nothing less. But Definitive Technology was not building a speaker for a sterile laboratory. They were building a speaker for the American living room. Priced at approximately $1,100 a pair upon its initial launch, roughly $2,600 in modern inflation-adjusted dollars. The BP-10 was expensive enough to command respect, but affordable enough for a dedicated middle-class buyer looking to build a serious system. The price was achieved through a brilliant manufacturing decision. The BP-10 did not use a beautiful, expensive walnut veneer. It was a tall, imposing monolith wrapped entirely in a black cloth sock, capped with a glossy piano-black wooden top plate. By skipping the expensive wood finishes, the company could pour the budget into high-quality drivers, complex crossovers, and heavy cabinet bracing. It looked less like traditional furniture and more like a piece of stealth technology. When placed in a real room, the BP-10 defied the critics. The purists were right about the laboratory measurements, but they were wrong about the human ear. The human brain interprets a slight delay in reflected sound as physical space. By bouncing its rear energy off the front wall of a room, the BP-10 effectively erased the physical boundaries of the house. In a cramped, drywall-lined basement, the speaker did not just play a movie soundtrack. It placed the listener inside the movie. It made a narrow room feel 60 feet wide. Gross understood that the average American home theater buyer did not care about sterile laboratory charts. They cared about the physical sensation of sound. The room did not care about the brochure. The listener either felt the walls disappear or they did not. The theory was mathematically sound. The challenge was convincing an American retail network to put it in the room and proving the purists wrong. In the early 1990s, walking into a premium American stereo store like Magnolia Hi-Fi or Tweeter was an exercise in visual expectation. The walls of the showrooms were lined with rectangular wooden boxes. They featured removable cloth grills, visible paper cones, and familiar walnut or oak veneers. A traditional American hi-fi speaker looked like a piece of furniture. Then, standing in the center of the premium listening room, a customer would encounter the Definitive Technology BP-10. It did not look like a traditional speaker. It looked like an architectural pillar, standing completely apart from the design language of American audio. The BP-10 stood 42 inches tall, possessing a slim, imposing footprint. It had no removable front grille to reveal the drivers. Instead, the entire cabinet was wrapped in a seamless, acoustically transparent black cloth sock, capped by a polished piano-black wooden top plate. The listener could not easily see the engineering underneath. Inside that monolithic exterior, the speaker housed an 8-inch mid-slash bass driver, a speaker cone designed to handle both low-end impact and the critical middle frequencies of human voices, and a 1-inch dome tweeter on the front baffle, the rigid wooden board that holds the speaker components securely in place. But mirroring this exact array, another identical woofer and tweeter were mounted on the rear of the cabinet. This was the Bipolar breakthrough, yet its true power was only revealed when the music or the movie started playing. The technical explanation of bipolar radiation had to translate into a physical experience, and in the American retail landscape of 1991, the demonstration was everything. In a typical home theater setup, a salesperson would seat the customer on a leather sofa, dim the showroom lights, and play a dynamic Dolby Surround movie soundtrack, perhaps the soaring fighter jets of Top Gun or the metallic, percussive chaos of Terminator 2. A traditional direct radiating speaker would shoot that sound straight at the listener's chest. It was highly accurate, but strictly confined to the physical location of the cabinets. The BP-10 split its energy. The front drivers hit the listener immediately, providing the sharp crack of dialogue or a gunshot with startling clarity. Simultaneously, the rear drivers fired the exact same acoustic energy backward. That rear wave traveled through the air, struck the drywall of the listening room, and bounced back toward the sofa, arriving just milliseconds after the front wave. This microsecond delay is how the human brain calculates the size of a physical space. By artificially generating that delay, the BP-10 tricked the room. It convinced the ear that the wall behind the speakers was actually 30 feet further back. The soundstage, the perceived width, depth, and placement of audio created by a stereo system, expanded massively, wrapping around the listener in a three-dimensional halo. A cramped, carpeted suburban basement suddenly possessed the acoustic dimensions of a commercial cinema. The breakthrough, however, was not just acoustic. It was deeply economic. In 1991, achieving this level of holographic, room-filling sound usually required exotic, uncompromising speaker technologies. High-end electrostatic speakers or elite European audiophile brands could create massive spatial imaging, but they often cost between $3,000 and $5,000 a pair. Furthermore, they possessed famously low sensitivity, a measurement of how loud a speaker plays from 1 watt of power, meaning they required massive, expensive amplifiers to function properly. The BP-10 launched at approximately $1,100 a pair. When adjusted for modern inflation, that is roughly $2,600, a serious investment for a middle-class American family, but well within reach for someone building their first dedicated home theater. For the price of a standard, directional hi-fi speaker, Definitive Technology offered a product that fundamentally altered the architecture of the room. This aggressive pricing strategy, combined with a jaw-dropping showroom performance, created a retail phenomenon. Definitive Technology deliberately bypassed the discount big box stores and targeted the elite regional dealer networks. The BP-10 became the star of the premium demonstration room. Regional heavyweights like Magnolia Hi-Fi in the Pacific Northwest, Tweeter on the East Coast, Meyer Emco in the Mid-Atlantic, and independent high-end AV installers across California quickly realized the BP-10 was the ultimate closing tool. A salesperson did not have to lecture a customer on the mathematics of bipolar dispersion. They only had to press play and watch the customer's reaction as the walls disappeared. The American audio press and enthusiast communities took notice, providing the institutional validation the brand needed. Stereo Review praised the BP-10 for its expansive, effortless presentation, while magazines like Audio Video Interiors and Sound and Vision recognized it as a definitive solution for the rapidly emerging home theater market. The enthusiast community on early internet audio forums began to evangelize the brand. The BP-10 proved that a speaker did not need to sound surgically sterile to be high fidelity. It proved that scale, weight, and emotional envelopment were just as valuable as flat frequency charts. This success established a protective moat around definitive technology. Competitors scrambled to figure out how to replicate the bipolar effect, assuming they could just point a few spare drivers at the wall. But designing a true bipolar speaker was incredibly difficult. It required a highly complex crossover, the electrical network inside a speaker that routes high, middle, and low frequencies to the correct drivers, that could ensure the front and rear waves remained in perfect phase. If the timing or tuning was slightly wrong, the rear bass frequencies would cancel out the front bass frequencies, leaving a thin, hollow, phase-distorted mess. Sandy Gross and his engineering team had mastered the math, and they owned the aesthetic of the Black Tower. By the mid-1990s, the BP-10 had cemented definitive technology as a dominant force in American audio. It successfully bridged the gap between the fading era of two-channel stereo listening and the explosive new era of multi-channel cinema sound. The badge on the piano black top plate was not just decoration. It was a promise about sound. The passive Black Tower had successfully tricked the room. Now it was about to mutate into something much larger to take over the entire American retail shelf. The BP-10 had proven that an American living room could be acoustically expanded, but by 1995, the rules of the American audio market were changing again. The era of analog surround sound was rapidly giving way to discrete digital audio. Hollywood was preparing to bring Dolby Digital and the dedicated LFE channel, the low-frequency effects track designed specifically to deliver the physical impact of explosions, thunder, and heavy bass directly into the home. This technological shift created an immediate conflict in American homes. Traditional hi-fi systems were not built to withstand this violent low-end energy. To hear a digital movie soundtrack correctly, an American buyer now needed a subwoofer, a dedicated speaker box built solely to reproduce very low bass frequencies. But early home theater subwoofers were massive, unsightly wooden cubes. They dominated valuable floor space. They required complicated wiring. They caused domestic friction, forcing buyers to choose between the aesthetic balance of a living room and the physical thrill of a movie theater. Sandy Gross and the engineering team at Definitive Technology recognized this friction and answered it with a brutal, elegant solution. They looked at the imposing, cloth-wrapped profile of their bipolar towers and realized they did not need to ask the customer to buy a separate wooden box. They could simply weaponize the tower itself. In 1995, Definitive Technology introduced the BP-2000. It was a monstrous, towering acoustic statement that effectively launched the golden age of the American-powered subwoofer tower, a speaker cabinet that plugged directly into a wall outlet to power its own internal bass drivers, freeing the external receiver to handle only the delicate mid-range and high frequencies. The BP-2000 retained the signature bipolar array, utilizing identically matched mid/bass drivers and tweeters, firing both forward and backward to create that massive, room-defying soundstage. But housed in the bottom of the black cabinet was a massive 15-inch woofer, driven by a dedicated built-in 300-watt amplifier. The physical execution changed the stakes of home audio entirely. In a sprawling suburban American basement, where a traditional stereo system would strain and distort trying to reproduce the chaotic roar of a Hollywood blockbuster, a pair of powered bipolar towers meant the listener did not just hear the bass. They felt the air pressure shift in their chest, perfectly synchronized with the image on the screen, without tripping over a separate wooden box on the floor. This engineering decision fundamentally altered the balance of power inside American stereo stores. The BP-2000 was expensive, retailing for around $3,000 a pair, or roughly $6,000 in modern inflation-adjusted dollars. Yet, it became the ultimate status symbol of the 1990s home theater boom. When a customer walked into a premium retail environment, a Tweeter on the East Coast, a Meyer Emco in the Mid-Atlantic, a Magnolia Hi-Fi in the Pacific Northwest, or an independent AV installer in Southern California, the demonstration was devastating. A salesperson no longer had to explain complex crossover networks or apologize for the massive footprint of external base modules. They simply walked the customer into a darkened listening room, pointed to the two black monoliths flanking the television, and pressed play. The footprint was minimal. The acoustic scale was colossal. The visual statement was absolute. By hiding the engineering behind a seamless black sock, Definitive Technology created an aura of curiosity and shock. Listeners could not see the massive 15-inch woofers moving, but they could feel the floorboards shaking. The walls of the showroom seemed to dissolve, replaced by the spatial acoustics of a massive commercial cinema. Traditional two-channel audiophiles continued to argue about pinpoint imaging, but the American consumer was voting with their wallets. They wanted the scale. They wanted the weight. They wanted the theater. The success of the BP2000 created an immediate burning question for the company. If the flagship-powered tower was dominating the high-end listening rooms, how could they capture the rest of the American middle class? The answer was a rapid, aggressive expansion that would push the Definitive Technology badge into almost every major retail market in the country. The answer to capturing the American middle class arrived alongside a new piece of technology that forever altered the domestic audio landscape: the DVD. Introduced in the late 1990s, the digital versatile disc did not just offer a sharper picture, it delivered discrete Dolby Digital and DTS 5.1 audio directly into the home. Unlike older analog VHS tapes, which sent a murky matrix signal to the speakers, the DVD sent 6 separate uncompressed channels of violent, highly dynamic sound. When the science fiction action film The Matrix was released on DVD in 1999, it became the ultimate stress test for American audio. Buyers realized instantly that their old two-channel hi-fi systems could not process the digital chaos of bullets, helicopters, and synthesized bass. To survive this new era, a speaker company could no longer just sell a pair of stereo towers. They had to sell an ecosystem. Definitive Technology answered by surrounding the American listener completely. Because the BP2000 towers already handled the massive left and right soundstage, the Exancias Descendadas, the engineering team in Maryland, developed a massive, dedicated center speaker to match them. They introduced the C/L/R series, a heavily braced center channel speaker, a specialized cabinet designed to sit directly above or below the television screen, tasked with reproducing up to 70% of a movie's dialogue and frontal impact. But Gross and his engineers knew that placing a weak center speaker between two massive powered towers would collapse the audio illusion. Therefore, the C/L/R 2000 was built like a tank, utilizing the exact same high-quality mid/bass drivers and aluminum dome tweeters as the flagship towers. When an actor spoke, the voice did not sound like it was coming from a small box. It sounded heavily anchored to the physical screen. To complete the room, the company launched dedicated bipolar surround speakers, wedge-shaped cabinets mounted on the side, and rear walls that fired sound forward and backward to wash the room in ambient, diffuse noise. The strategy was flawless, and the retail expansion was explosive. The Definitive Technology badge rapidly moved beyond the boutique high-end shops and began dominating regional American powerhouses. The brand commanded premium floor space at Harvey Electronics in New York, Sound Advice in Florida, and Ultimate Electronics across the Midwest. When Best Buy acquired the Magnolia Hi-Fi chain in 2000 and began building premium Magnolia home theater, store-within-a-store concepts inside their massive big-box locations, Definitive Technology became a cornerstone of their high-end audio strategy. Simultaneously, the brand conquered the American mail-order market. The Crutchfield catalog, mailed to millions of American homes, featured full-page, high-gloss spreads of the black, cloth-wrapped towers. For the audio enthusiast living hundreds of miles from a premium stereo store, those catalog pages made the BP Towers aspirational objects. Definitive Technology was shipping thousands of massive, heavy cabinets out of their Maryland staging facilities, effectively acting as the undisputed king of the American home theater boom. By the early 2000s, the American cultural moment for the brand had reached its absolute peak. The dedicated home theater had become a modern suburban status symbol. It was a room defined by excess, thick acoustic carpets, heavy leather recliners, and racks of glowing electronics. In a sprawling suburban American basement, where two cheap box speakers could make a blockbuster movie sound thin, harsh, and chaotic, a full Definitive Technology bipolar system could make the floorboards vibrate, the drywall disappear, and the listener believe they were sitting inside a commercial cinema. The physical scene at the peak of this era was imposing. In a darkened room, a massive silver Denon or Yamaha AV receiver, an amplifier designed to process digital video and route multiple channels of surround sound, glowed from a heavy glass rack. Thick spools of copper speaker wire ran under the baseboards. Flanking the heavy cathode ray tube television stood two BP 2000 towers, their black cloth socks absorbing the light, giving no visual clue to the engineering inside. When the movie started, the internal 300-watt amplifiers engaged with a soft, mechanical click. The massive 15-inch woofers, hidden near the floor, moved violently under the cloth, pushing vast amounts of air into the room. The cabinets, heavily braced with thick engineered wood, remained dead still. Every room, every movie, every speaker. It was an overwhelming physical manifestation of American acoustic ambition. The company had successfully merged the precise engineering of traditional high fidelity with the brute force demands of the cinema. They had proven that reflected sound was not a gimmick, but a legitimate pathway to building a better listening room. They had built the undisputed heavyweights of the American living room. But the American living room was preparing to shrink. The collapse of the American bipolar speaker empire did not begin with a flaw in the audio engineering. It began with a change in the physical dimensions of the television. For the entire decade of the 1990s, the massive Definitive Technology towers shared the living room with the heavy, deep cathode ray tube television. Because a CRT television required a large wooden entertainment center or a deep recess to sit inside, the television screen naturally sat 2 to 3 feet away from the back wall. This meant the BP-10 and the powered BP 2000 towers flanking the screen also sat 2 to 3 feet out into the room. This physical arrangement was not just visually balanced, it was acoustically mandatory. A bipolar speaker requires physical space to breathe. To create that massive holographic soundstage, the rear-firing drivers need distance to bounce their acoustic energy off the drywall and create the necessary microsecond delay. But in the early 2000s, the flat-panel plasma and LCD televisions arrived in the American market. Suddenly, American consumers were unboxing incredibly thin screens and mounting them directly onto the drywall. The heavy wooden entertainment centers were dragged to the curb. The entire visual weight of the home theater was pushed completely flat against the front wall. And in this new, minimalist environment, standing a massive cloth-wrapped monolith 3 feet out into the middle of the carpet suddenly looked completely out of place. It looked like an obstruction. When buyers tried to solve this visual problem by shoving their Definitive Technology towers flat against the back wall to sit flush with the new plasma screens, the acoustic physics broke down. Without adequate breathing room, the rear-firing drivers bounced their energy too quickly. The magical microsecond delay collapsed. The bass became muddy, and the expansive soundstage was instantly choked off. The speaker was still functioning perfectly, but the physical reality of the American living room had become structurally hostile to its design. This was the first wave of Force 5, the technological, retail, and listening culture shift. The American audio market was pivoting violently away from massive physical scale and toward visual convenience. Inside premium retail spaces like Magnolia Home Theater, the listening rooms began to transform. Customers walking in to purchase a new flat-screen television no longer wanted to dedicate massive amounts of floor space to audio. They wanted a sound system that mirrored the sleek, thin profile of their new screens. The audio industry recognized this shift and unleashed a new weapon onto the retail shelf: the soundbar, a long, narrow speaker system designed to sit directly under a television, replacing the need for an entire room full of separate cabinets and complex wiring. Early soundbars and compact home theater-in-a-box systems did not sound anywhere near as powerful, dynamic, or detailed as a pair of powered bipolar towers. But the American market was demonstrating a brutal new retail logic. The cheaper, thinner speaker did not need to image perfectly. It only needed to sound good enough in a living room where the buyer valued a clean aesthetic over absolute fidelity. As the retail floor space dedicated to massive towers began to shrink, the corporate structure behind Definitive Technology began to shift. The original founders recognized that the golden era of the dedicated, sprawling home theater was peaking. In 2004, the brand encountered Force 4, corporate consolidation. Definitive Technology was sold to Directed Electronics, a massive American corporation best known for manufacturing Viper car alarms and vehicle security systems. The brand had successfully transitioned from an independent founder-led audio lab in Maryland into a line item on a corporate balance sheet. For a time, the badge remained and the sales continued. But the internal culture of the company fundamentally changed. Sandy Gross, the visionary who had carefully guided the acoustic philosophy and retail strategy of the brand, eventually departed to found a new audio company, Golden Ear Technology. He took with him the pure, uncompromising belief in the massive acoustic soundstage, leaving the Definitive Technology name in the hands of corporate executives tasked with maintaining market share in an increasingly difficult retail environment. To survive the flat-screen revolution, Directed Electronics forced the brand to adapt. The product lines were slowly redesigned. The iconic, imposing black cloth socks that had defined the BP series for a decade were gradually phased out. In their place came modern aluminum extrusions, slimmer cabinets, and lifestyle-oriented designs aimed at matching the silver and black plastics of modern televisions. The company began producing its own sound bars, effectively competing against its own legacy of massive air displacement. The strategy kept the company profitable, and the new speakers still sounded excellent to the average consumer. But a critical threshold had been crossed. The engineering was no longer leading the market was dictating the engineering. The brand was surviving the flat-screen revolution, but to do so, it had to begin quietly dismantling the very acoustic philosophy that had built its empire. As the flat-screen television continued to dictate the dimensions of the American living room, the retail environment that had built the Definitive Technology empire began to collapse. For 2 decades, the bipolar tower speaker relied entirely on the physical demonstration. A salesperson had to seat the customer in a darkened room, press play, and let the massive acoustic soundstage shock the listener into a purchase. But by the 2000s, Force 2, hi-fi dealers, big box retail, and online price pressure had radically altered American buying habits. Regional stereo chains like Tweeter and Ultimate Electronics went bankrupt. Best Buy began shrinking the footprint of its premium Magnolia listening rooms, dedicating the saved floor space to mobile phones and smart home devices. Consumers stopped driving to stereo stores to audition heavy wooden cabinets. Instead, they logged onto Amazon and Crutchfield, reading user reviews for soundbars and wireless streaming speakers. This created an unsolvable problem for the bipolar tower. How do you demonstrate a massive, room-tricking holographic soundstage. Through a YouTube review or a website photograph, you cannot. The unique physical engineering of the speaker became a liability in an era of digital convenience. Buyers were purchasing audio based on visual aesthetics, wireless connectivity, and shipping weight. A massive, heavy, cloth-wrapped tower that required physical space to breathe could not survive a retail ecosystem that prioritized next-day delivery and plug-and-play simplicity. To compensate for the disappearing stereo stores, the corporate parent company, Directed Electronics, restructured. In 2013, the audio division was spun off and rebranded as Sound United. Definitive Technology was now bundled into a massive portfolio alongside other fallen or acquired American audio giants, including Polk Audio and Boston Acoustics. The resulting corporate consolidation was a textbook example of Force 4, corporate consolidation, licensing, and brand dilution. When multiple historic speaker brands are absorbed under a single corporate umbrella, the unique engineering cultures that built them are usually destroyed to maximize efficiency. Engineering teams were centralized. Global supply chains were consolidated. Acoustic research facilities were merged. Definitive Technology, once an uncompromising founder-led company that forced the market to adapt to its massive designs, was now just another product line on a spreadsheet. The brand was ordered to chase the soundbar market. They engineered high-end active soundbars to compete with Sonos and Bose, utilizing DSP, digital signal processing, a computer chip that manipulates audio signals to create artificial spatial effects. The paradox was staggering. The company that had built its entire reputation on using physical drivers and the actual walls of a room to create a massive acoustic delay was now relying on microchips to fake the exact same effect. The product lines were drastically pruned. The towering, massive BP2000 descendants with their 15-inch subwoofers were quietly discontinued. The iconic black cloth socks were abandoned completely. The new towers released under the Definitive Technology badge were slim, aluminum-clad, and visually modern, but they no longer dominated the room. They no longer terrified the audiophile establishment. They were simply good, competent speakers competing in a shrinking market against cheaper imports and private labels. Then, in 2022, the final, most jarring corporate shock arrived. Sound United, the holding company that owned Definitive Technology, Polk Audio, Bowers & Wilkins, and Marantz, was suddenly acquired for $1 billion. But the buyer was not a legendary hi-fi manufacturer. It was Masimo, a massive American medical technology corporation famous for manufacturing pulse oximeters, hospital monitors, and wearable health trackers. The dissonance of the acquisition sent shockwaves through the audio industry. A medical device company had purchased some of the most famous names in American audio. Financial analysts noted that Masimo was primarily interested in acquiring Sound United's global distribution network and its consumer data platforms to push their own consumer health wearables into Best Buy and other retail channels. The legendary speaker brands were largely viewed as an afterthought, a Trojan horse to get medical technology onto retail shelves. The original promise of the Maryland Audio Lab was dead. The engineers were gone. The retail network was dismantled. The physics of the living room had changed. The collapse accelerated. The massive cabinets were discontinued. The listening rooms were closed. The big box shelves were cleared. The heavy receivers were unplugged. The dedicated theaters were emptied. The sound bars took over. The medical company held the badge. The corporate portfolio was secure. The American home theater, as a physical temple of sound, was gone. The Definitive Technology badge did not disappear from the American retail shelf. The brand survived, but the identity was completely hollowed out. Today, under the ownership of Masimo, you can still purchase speakers bearing the famous name at premium big box retailers. But the DNA of the original Maryland Audio Lab has been irreparably altered. The massive, intimidating, cloth-wrapped subwoofer towers of the 1990s are gone. In their place are slim, aluminum-accented lifestyle towers, compact subwoofers, and an endless array of soundbars. The name survived the corporate consolidation. The acoustic philosophy was compromised to fit modern retail logic. But the original black monoliths have not completely vanished. Across the American secondary market, a quiet, dedicated preservation culture continues to keep the bipolar empire alive. The teenagers and young adults who drooled over the Crutchfield catalog spreads in 1998 are now home theater purists. On Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace, AudioGone, and specialized digital communities like AVS Forum, vintage audio enthusiasts actively hunt down original BP-10s, BP-2000s, and massive CLR center channels. They are driving trucks to estate sales and carrying 100-pound wooden cabinets out of suburban basements. They are engaging in the meticulous, frustrating work of restoration. They are carefully peeling back the iconic, tightly stretched black cloth socks, a notoriously difficult process. They are refoaming, replacing the deteriorated foam surrounds on the massive 15-inch woofers that have dry rotted after 25 years of use. They are tracking down replacement capacitor networks for the complex crossovers. They are sending the heavy, burnt-out internal amplifier plates to specialized repair benches across the country to bring the built-in subwoofers back to life. This immense physical effort is not driven purely by visual nostalgia. It is driven by functional physics. Modern audio engineering relies heavily on algorithmic trickery to create spatial sound. A modern high-end soundbar uses tiny drivers and microchips to artificially bounce high frequencies off the ceiling and side walls, attempting to fake the illusion of cinematic depth. But a restored definitive technology-powered bipolar tower does not fake the physics. It executes them, pushing a massive physical column of air from the front baffle, pushing an identical column of air from the rear baffle, and utilizing a dedicated floor-coupled 15-inch woofer to pressurize a room creates a violent physical sensation that a slim plastic bar simply cannot replicate. The original American bipolar tower still matters because it represents an era when acoustic engineering was fundamentally honest. A DSP microchip can manipulate a digital signal, but it cannot move air. You cannot download displacement. The heavy wooden cabinet, the massive magnet structures, and the calculated reflection of sound off a physical drywall boundary still create a holographic soundstage that digital processing can only imitate. The geography of the brand, however, has entirely shifted. The original headquarters and acoustic testing facilities in Owings Mills, Maryland, where Sandy Gross and his team first mapped out the bipolar array, are no longer the center of this audio empire. The independent labs and listening rooms that birthed the BP-10 have long been absorbed, relocated, and replaced. Today, the corporate operations are managed from centralized holding company campuses, grouped alongside medical technology divisions and other acquired audio brands. The specific Maryland commercial footprint that once shaped the sound of the American suburb has moved on. The original factory lines are quiet, yet a strange, resilient footnote remains in the American audio record. While the definitive technology brand was forced by its corporate parents to move away from the massive cloth-wrapped towers, the original founder did not give up on the American listener. After leaving the company, Sandy Gross went on to found Golden Ear Technology. His new company returned to the exact same formula: tall, cloth-wrapped towers with built-in powered subwoofers. It proved that a dedicated segment of the American market never actually stopped wanting massive physical sound. They just needed someone who still had the authority to build it outside the constraints of a medical technology portfolio. The rise and fall of the American bipolar tower reveals exactly how the modern consumer electronics market operates, We say we want high fidelity. We say we want the visceral, physical impact of a commercial movie theater in our homes. But when forced to choose between the physical footprint required to generate that true acoustic scale and the visual convenience of a modern flat-screen television, the market chooses convenience. We traded physical fidelity for visual minimalism. We traded the massive wooden cabinet for the wireless plastic cylinder. We traded the dedicated stereo store for the online review. The market praises acoustic perfection, but it ultimately rewards invisibility. It rewards the brand that can make a speaker disappear, even if the depth of the sound disappears with it. Somewhere in a carpeted American basement, a pair of heavy, cloth-wrapped towers still stands flanking an old television. The black socks faded by decades of sunlight. The massive internal woofers waiting for a receiver to click on, ready to make the walls disappear one more time. See you in the next one.